Hi, everyone. I'm going to get started. It's a couple of minutes after 2. Hopefully everyone can hear me. This is the webinar for Transit Asset Management Plan Template for Tier 2 providers and sponsors. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. We are pleased to have as our presenter today Dr. Margaret Avis Kofio-Soa. Margaret is an asset management and business strategy consultant with the WSP USA's Advisory Services Group. In this role, she provides services for clients in asset management strategy and implementation, asset management training, business process improvement, and program management. In her work, she also leverages her knowledge of organizational development and change management in advancing asset management programs. Margaret received her Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, and her Master of Science and Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, in Civil Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. Margaret is co-author of the FTA's Asset Management Guide for Small Providers and the primary developer of the Tier 2 Asset Management Plan template. She has an advanced teaching certificate for engineering education from Georgia Tech and has experience in teaching civil infrastructure systems analysis, performance measurement, economic decision-making, and project evaluation. Today's webinar consists of Margaret presenting her material, followed by a question and answer session at the end. You can participate in the discussion by using the chat pod that is located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Throughout today's webinar, I will be monitoring the chat, and during the presentation, if you have any questions, I will save them and I will ask Margaret the questions at the end. I will make note of when you ask them and what slide is up, so hopefully we can get everyone's questions answered, even though you're all on listen-in only. If you haven't already printed out a copy of the presentation that was emailed to you, you can click on the handout document in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, where it says handouts up there, or you could paste the link that is in the notes box directly below that, the one that says handouts. The Excel template that Margaret will be showing us during the presentation is also available for you to download by copying and pasting that link into your browser. It's not a hyperlink. I can't do that, so you have to copy and paste. If you need anything else after the webinar, I will be more than happy to help you. My email is lglickman@nti.rutgers.edu, and I will help you out. Without any further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Margaret.
All right, thank you, Lori, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to jump right into the material so that we can make the most of our time here. So this webinar is an addendum to the NTI training course that's being offered around the country for Tier 2 providers and their sponsors. That training course introduces the concept of asset management into detail, but specifically for small providers, and introduces the requirements of the FTA final rule on asset management that were published in July 2016. While the goal of this webinar is to review the FTA resources provided for small transit agencies, we will focus mostly on the Excel template that was designed to help transit agencies develop a fairly simple asset management plan. Now, I know that there may be some of you who may have attended one of the in-person full training courses, so a lot of the material that I'm going to go through might look familiar. But what we're going to do that's different is that we will dive into the template perhaps in more detail than the in-person course. By the end of this webinar, our hope is that you will be able to summarize what goes into an asset management plan and know how to navigate the template and use it to develop a basic plan for a small provider. What I'm going to do today is I will begin with a very brief overview of the FTA TAM guide in general, and then focus on the template with an actual walkthrough of the Excel tool. So at some point, we will switch over to my screen, and I'll have the Excel tool up, and I'll walk through it so that you can see how it works. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into the comment box as Lori mentioned, and we will provide answers at the end.
Margaret, I'm sorry to interrupt, but someone in the chat box said they're having trouble hearing you, that there's an echo. I don't know if you're on hands-free or if there's any way you can speak closer to the microphone maybe, see if that helps. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. I don't know if this, let me try to move the microphone up a little bit. So I've just moved it up, so hopefully this is a little better, and I'm going to try to speak a little louder as well.
Great,
so,
thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to begin with a brief overview of the TAM guide, like I mentioned, and then I'll do a walkthrough of the Excel tool itself. And then we'll take the questions at the end on the functional capabilities of the tool. If you would like to follow along with the template while we're doing the walkthrough, there is a note to the left of your screen. Lori also mentioned this before, with instructions on how to download the file. Or you can download the file from the FTA's Asset Management website. So before we begin, I would like to know who we have in the audience. So you should see a poll question pop up on your screen. Asking about the agency that you represent. So please select the option that best describes your agency. And I'll give you all a few minutes to do that. Okay, so it looks like we have mostly small providers that are classified as FTA's Tier 2 in the audience, so that's good. This is exactly who this template is built for. We also have quite a number of DOTs sponsoring the plan, and then a lot of people in the other category. So that's good. So we have a pretty good mix for the webinar today. Okay, so let's jump right in. I'm going to start, like I said, with the overview of the TAM guide as a whole. So the guide was developed as a supplement to the 2012 FTA TAM guide, which provided some general guidance for transit agencies as a whole. This small provider guide applies that general asset management framework to the context of a provider that has fewer assets and fewer resources, and are generally categorized in FTA's Tier 2 category. I'm not going to go through the definition because I'm sure most of you are all familiar with this or have heard this several times. But what's important to note is that while the guide is not a replacement for the federal regulations, it actually provides some general guidance that's scaled down in a sense for developing a good practice asset management plan that will still meet the FTA requirements. The guide that I'm referring to is actually made up of two parts. So the first part to the left of the screen is what we refer to as a TAM plan primer. And that's the main content of the guide. It provides detailed information on asset management in general, information on asset management plans, and information on asset management plans. And then to the right of your screen, we have the template or the tool, which is what can help an agency develop a very simple asset management plan. So these two resources go hand in hand, and while the primer can be used on its own, the template is really built based on the assumption that the user is generally familiar with the primer. So very briefly, the primer itself has 5 main sections, which begins with an introduction to asset management and then goes into detail on the structure and content of asset management plans. So as I mentioned before, this webinar is not meant to provide a detailed walkthrough of the primer, but I will talk briefly about the content of asset management plans as detailed in this document, just to provide some foundation for when we do walk through the template. Before we continue, though, I would like to know how many of you all have reviewed or used the primer. There should be another poll popping up on your screen shortly asking you the question of whether or not you have reviewed or used the Asset Management Plan Primer. Okay, so it looks like most of the audience has not used the Asset Management Primer, which is fine. Like I said, I'm only going to focus on what it talks about in terms of the contents of an asset management plan. But the primer itself is very useful if you would like to know more about asset management in general and also the FTA requirements. So moving on, these are the 5 core elements that are talked about in the primer as elements that go into a good practice asset management plan. And the good thing is that this actually aligns with the 4 things that the FTA requires in asset management plans for Tier 2 providers. So the first is the introduction, which provides a general orientation to your agency or to the group, and also talks about the services that the transit provider provides. It includes information like your agency goals, your performance targets, a vision and mission if you have one, and so on and so forth. The second section is the capital asset inventory, and this is really the first step in organizing and managing your asset information. So in this section, you would identify the assets that you have that you use to deliver your services, and basically include the data that you have on how you maintain these assets. The third section is the condition assessment. A well-established condition assessment process can help predict failure, identify unacceptable safety risks, and support decision-making activities. So this section is where you would provide additional information on the assets that you own or the assets that you have and use to provide service related to the condition they are in. And then here you would also discuss how the condition of your assets compares to the performance targets that you set in the very first section, which is the introduction. Then you have the decision support section, which documents your management approach. So it considers the strategies, requirements, processes, and activities that are needed over the course of the life of your assets, including how you manage your risk, your the decision support tools that you use, and your investment prioritization processes. Then the last element is the investment prioritization, which is where you identify the investments that you've selected over the horizon period of your asset management plan to maintain your assets in a state of good repair or enhance the condition and performance. So this element would be an actual listing of the projects that the investment projects that you've selected. So asset management plans can cover more than these 5 elements, but ultimately the purpose of the plan is to document how you intend on achieving your asset management goals in order to maintain your assets in a state of good repair. So now I'm going to go into the template itself, and this is the main focus for today, obviously. There are 9 parts to the asset management plan template, which generally follow the 5 core elements that we just went over. And then in addition to those 5 elements, there is a fleet replacement module which has been added to provide some analysis and recommendations for how your fleet can be replaced. So I'll talk through each of these parts, and then when we switch over to the Excel, I will walk through each tab. But before we do that, this is the last poll question. We want to see how many of you have reviewed or used the template. And so there should be another poll on your screen right now. Please select the response on whether you have used or reviewed the asset management plan template. Okay, so it seems like we have almost a 50-50 split on people who have used the template versus those who have not. So that's good to know for as we continue through this. I'll be sure to try to answer a lot of the questions that you all have since you've already used the template. All right, so the first tab, once we open up the template, is the Instructions tab. And really what that does is it helps orient the user to the template. So there are three main things that you'll see on the Instructions tab. Some information on who should use the template is first. So we talk about state DOTs or MPOs who are developing plans for their subrecipients, and then also small transit providers that are developing their own plans. The second piece of information is guidance on how to actually navigate through the tool. So the tabs are color-coded by which tabs are data entry tabs, which tabs are output tabs, and which ones are introductory or reference tabs. And then in addition, we have yellow cells on each tab which indicate where you should enter in data. And then in the output tabs, there are red cells which indicate where there's some missing information. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this presentation. And then finally, on the Instructions tab, there's a section that basically describes the difference between a comprehensive plan versus a basic plan. And so the basic plan essentially meets the FTA requirements and develops a very simple asset management plan. The comprehensive plan includes additional questions to generate a more holistic asset management plan, which goes beyond the FTA requirements. And so on the Instructions tab, you have the option to hide all your comprehensive questions or show all the comprehensive questions as you go through the template. So before we go on, I'm going to help give some information on how to navigate the input pages. Each sheet is generally organized in the same way. First, you have the title of the page or the worksheet at the top in big blue text. Then you have a gray bar at the top which denotes the sections that are basic versus comprehensive and essentially shows which sections are required by the FTA requirements. Then you have the yellow cells, which is where information should be entered into. So again, you only enter in information into those yellow cells. And actually, if you try to enter information into a cell that's not yellow, you should get a dialog box from Excel which tells you that you're on a protected sheet and so are not able to enter in data there. Then the questions that you should answer to complete the template are listed also in blue text with a title in blue text, and then the text of the question itself is bolded. So those are the questions that you should answer to complete the template. And then finally, we have blue boxes scattered throughout the template which provide information to differentiate between a group sponsor using the template versus a small provider using the template. Then the next tab is a Getting Started tab, which is an introductory page to help you begin using the template. So what's important to note here is that the information that is entered on this sheet is not included in the final output, but it does provide some general reference information. So for example, the type of plan that's being developed, the agency that's sponsoring, the person who last modified the plan, and the date and time that it was last modified. On this tab, you can also list the subrecipients that are included if this is a group plan that you are developing. And then under related documents, we have some questions that essentially help the user think through what they might need as they go through developing the plan. So again, this information does not print out in the final output of this tool, but it's really just to help you orient yourself as you begin to use the template. So again, the introduction section establishes the context for your plan. This sheet accepts information for the first section of your TAM plan, which provides an introduction to your agency's approach. There are two basic questions or 2 questions for a basic asset management plan related to your performance targets and your agency background. And then there are 4 questions for a comprehensive asset management plan related to roles and responsibilities, goals and objectives, a policy if you have one, and an asset management vision if you have one. So this is a better view of the basic portion of the introduction sheet. Again, you have the overview of your agency and then your performance targets. And then the comprehensive view, you can see here that the background on this sheet is gray. And then you have questions related to the vision, the policy, and so on and so forth. Then the next section is your capital asset inventory, which is the primary data entry sheet for putting in your inventory information. This can also be referred to as the asset register. So when you go onto this tab, on the left side, you'll see what the view that you have on the screen here, which provides some instructions on how to use the sheet, and then also provides a summary table of the data that you've entered. To the right of the screen is where you'll see where you actually put in your inventory information. So this is an inventory table, and it collects information, or it collects data on the characteristics of your assets, historical information, and valuation information as well. Then the next tab is the condition assessment, which pulls information from the inventory list and accepts additional details to develop an asset condition summary. So again, when you go on this tab, this is the first view you should have, which provides you with some instructions on how to use this sheet, and then also a summary table of the condition. We'll scroll to the right, and you will see that there's a condition table for revenue vehicles. And so it pulls the information that you entered into the inventory table, and the only input that you will need to include here is for your useful life benchmark. As you continue to scroll to the right in the Excel file, you'll find an equipment condition table, which is the same as the revenue vehicle table. And again, here you will be required to enter in useful life benchmark information. And then finally, you have the same thing for a facilities condition table, but here you will enter in the condition of your asset following the term scale. So once you enter in all this information, when we go into the Excel, you'll see there's a summarize button, and that's how you generate the condition summary table. Then the next tab is a decision support tab, which documents your lifecycle activities. So it accepts information on the strategies, processes, and activities that you conduct over the course of the life of your assets, and identifies any decision support tools and your investment prioritization methods to facilitate the whole life management of the asset. Here again, there are 2 questions for a basic asset management plan and 4 questions for a comprehensive asset management plan. This is a better view of the basic portion of this tab. It simply asks for a list of your decision support processes or tools with a brief description, and then a description of how you determine what priority investments are needed for your assets. Then the comprehensive questions go into more detail about risk management, maintenance strategies, overhaul and disposal strategies, and asset acquisition and renewal strategies. And then the last of the core elements is the investment prioritization tab, which documents your improvement activities. So here, this is really a data entry sheet for the specific activities and projects over the horizon period of your asset management plan to maintain your assets in a state of good repair or enhance the asset condition. So you'll see the one basic question here is for your proposed investments, where you're asked to list out your investments by year and provide detail on the cost, priority, and asset category. And then you have the question that makes a comprehensive plan, which asks about your capital investment activity schedule. Then the fleet replacement module is an optional sheet that you can use to inform your fleet replacement schedule. So when we click on this tab, you'll see this first sheet here. Again, this tab pulls information from your inventory. So it pulls the data that you entered in for revenue vehicles. And actually, even though these cells here are yellow, the data will already be in there once you activate the fleet replacement module. So you'll basically check this information, and then as you scroll to the right, you'll find that the tool basically ages your existing fleet to show the number of remaining vehicles in the next 5 years. So again, this is just a calculation table, and the user is not expected to make any changes to this table. It uses the age of your vehicle or the age of the fleet and the useful life benchmark that you entered in to age the fleet over the 5-year period. Then as you continue scrolling to the right, you'll see where the tool calculates the vehicles that are required. I think this might be a little hard to see on your screens, but essentially the user is supposed to enter in the peak number of vehicles scheduled in each year, and then also the spare factor for that particular fleet. And then what it does is it calculates the number of vehicles that are required in each year. Then the last portion of the fleet replacement module is where the tool calculates the purchase value or the cost for the number of each fleet type that you will need in each year to give you an understanding of how much you would be spending in each year if you were to replace your fleet completely. So again, this module, this tool is expected to inform your investment prioritization, but not necessarily, you're not necessarily expected to use the output of this as is to feed into your investment prioritization. It's expected that there will be some additional decision making beyond this information. It also takes in an inflation rate to be able to convert those prices into a total cost in the year of expenditure. So once you complete the template, it produces a draft asset management plan in output sheets. Now, although these are output sheets in Excel, you're not expected to enter in information into any of these cells. And so you'll see that there are no yellow cells on any of these pages. One thing to note is that where you see a red cell, that indicates that the plan is missing information for a basic asset management plan. So you can print a completed TAM plan using the controls that are on the TAM plan sheet, or you can use the regular Excel functions to print out your plan. So at this point, I'm going to switch over and do a walkthrough of the template itself. So please bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen to be able to use the Excel file. And then I think if you use the full screen mode, so on your screen, to the top right corner, there's a button that you can use to make your view go to a full screen view, and that should help you see a lot of this information a little better. Now, this is the file downloaded from the FTA website. I have another file which already has data in it, just to save us some time as we go through this. So I'll let you know when I'm switching between those two. I will be copying and pasting some information so that you can actually see how the data is entered. So I'll just give everyone a second to figure out how to get to full screen, and then we'll go from there. All right, so as I said, when you open up the tool, you should see this first cover page, which is just a standard cover page to excuse me, give information on the tool. So the first tab we click to is the Instructions tab. I already talked through this. You'll see there's a lot of text on this slide, on this sheet, sorry. It provides a lot of information on who should use the template, how to navigate through the tool, and then the workbook structure. We've already gone through the tab color keys. We've gone through the worksheet descriptions, and then we've also gone through the data entry portion. So you'll see if I click on Hide All Comprehensive Questions, as I'm going through the tabs, you won't see any of the comprehensive questions. So actually, what I'm going to do now is just click on the Introduction tab so that you can see here is the basic information. And then when you scroll to the bottom, you see that there are no comprehensive questions. But if I click Show All Comprehensive Questions, when I click back to the Introduction tab, you have the basic at the top and then the comprehensive questions now at the bottom. For this walkthrough, I'm going to develop a basic plan just to save us some time. So I'm clicking on Hide All Comprehensive Questions now, and then when I start to go through the tool, you'll see that there'll be no comprehensive questions. So to start, you click Begin, and then it takes you over to the Getting Started tab. Now, of course, if you're familiar with using Excel, you might be inclined to click the actual tabs as opposed to using the buttons that are on the sheet. Our advice is that you use the buttons on the sheet because some of them do have some coding behind them to update future sheets or to save the plan itself. And actually, I have to take a step back here because what we also recommend is that when you start, you actually save the file so that you will always have a blank file to go through. All right, so I'm developing a basic plan here. Make this bigger. So I'm developing a basic plan here. So let's just say that I am an individual TAM plan or Tier 2 provider. For my agency name, I'm just going to put Test Agency. Accountable Executive Joe Schmo. And then last modified by myself, so I'll put my name in there. And here you see the last modified date is April 20th because this has not been saved yet. So once you save, the last modified date here will update. So before I continue, I selected to say that I am a Tier 2 provider, individual TAM plan. But if I had selected a group sponsor, this note appears here to prompt me to scroll down to list my subrecipients. So then I would scroll down to the bottom here and then put in a listing of my subrecipients and the accountable executive. But I'm not going to do that because I'm developing a individual template. So this related documents section, I'm going to skip over this, but again, this is just to help the user orient themselves and basically prepare to use the template. So you would just scroll down and click whether you have or don't have any of the documents that are referenced here. And again, this does not print out on your output. So at the bottom of every tab, we recommend that you click Save, which saves the file. And then you hit Continue to go into the plan. So the first question is to provide a brief overview. What I'm going to do here is actually copy in the information from my completed plan. So you would be able to type into this cell here, but I'm just copying and pasting just to save us some time. Now the performance targets and measures section, we included here asset classes that most small providers have and left out asset classes that most small providers should not have or do not have. But we also included some custom labels here. So if there's an asset class that you have that's not listed here, you can enter it in here. So I'm going to put paratransit vehicle. And then you would put in your targets here as well. And it's the same for your equipment and the same for your facilities. So just bear with me while I do the copy and paste. Okay. And then it says here that you may provide text explaining the methods that you use, but I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, so I also created another custom asset class for equipment called computer equipment, and then I pulled in my equipment targets for 2018 and 2019. And then I have targets also for facilities, so I'm also going to pull that in here. Okay, so once we finish entering in the data here, we're going to hit save so that it saves the file. Before I continue, I want to point out the hide and show questions here. So if a group TAM plan sponsor is using this template and say they're sending it out to their subrecipients to collect information, they may have chosen to choose targets for the group as a whole. And so if I click on the hide targets button, what it does is it hides that question on targets so that the user only enters in information into this first cell here. Or I can click show targets, which shows that question, and then you can enter in information there. So you'll see a lot of these buttons as we continue to go through this. So I just wanted to give that information. All right, so let's continue to our asset inventory. So again, I went over this. These are some instructions that we really recommend that you follow to the T to make sure that the formulas and the processes that have been built into this, this template work as they should. So the direction here is to list all your asset inventory in this table to the right. If you need to add more rows, you can use the add more button that's down at the bottom. The instruction also says once you're done to click finish at the bottom. So finish was at the bottom of this table. And then you come back up here and click summarize and then continue to proceed to the next sheet. So to enter in your inventory, it's very important that instead of just typing in information, where there are drop-down menus, you use the drop-down menus. So let me make this bigger. So first, you select your asset category, revenue vehicles, and then it automatically populates the classes that you that were listed on the first tab, the introduction tab here. And then you'll see at the bottom, it also lists the custom asset class that I created, right? So you can click any of these, and then you enter in. The rest of the information is information that you just type in. So again, to save us some time, I'm going to copy and paste my asset information here. Because this is a small provider, they only have a few assets. So say I've typed in all my asset information, I will scroll down to the bottom of the table, I would click finish, and then I will come back up here and click summarize. And then you'll see that my asset summary table has been populated. So I have 9 revenue vehicles, I have 4 pieces of equipment, and then I have 6 facilities. And then it also calculates some average information for each of the asset classes and asset categories. So I would hit save just to be sure that I'm saving as I go along. And then I would continue on to the next tab. So the next tab is the condition assessment tab. Now you'll see here that, well, sorry, let me back up for a second. So the first thing you see are these instructions on how to use the condition assessment tab. There's also a condition assessment summary table, and in this case, this has already been populated with the information that we entered into the inventory. So if I scroll to the right, you'll see that the information that I entered into the inventory table has been pulled in here with the exception of the useful life benchmarks. So I would then go through and enter in my useful life benchmarks. I'm making up numbers as I go here. Let's say 10 here. Okay. And so you would continue to scroll to the right and do the same for both equipment and facilities. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste. And then lastly, for the condition assessment table, for the facilities condition table, it's a term scale rating. Now for this table, note that it's a drop down. There's a note here which explains what each of the rankings on the term scale means. So you would click the drop down and then select one of the numbers that best represents what the condition of your facility is. So I'll just save us some time here. Now once this is done, if I scroll back to the left, I will hit summarize, and then it will generate my condition summary table showing me the proportion of my assets that are at or past their useful life benchmark, and then also giving me an average term scale rating for my facilities. So again, I'll click continue to move on to the next tab, which is decision support. So the basic questions here, there are two of them. The first is to list the processes and tools that you use as you are developing your asset management plan. So I have the fleet replacement module as my one tool that I use. So you would type it in, fleet replacement module, and then type in your brief description. And then same thing for the investment prioritization. Okay, and note that you can always add more rows. So if I click add more, it adds additional rows to my decision support table so that I can list more processes or tools if I have them. So then once I'm done, I'll click continue and go over to the fifth chapter, which is your investment prioritization. Now, there's only one question on here because we're developing a basic plan, which is asking for a listing of your proposed investments. So in this situation, in this example situation, I'm going to click on Use Fleet Replacement Module, which will it will pull up the fleet replacement sheet and pull in the information in here like I described earlier. So again, this is a listing of my existing fleet that was pulled in from the inventory that I entered in. And then it also pulled in the replacement value, the useful life benchmark from my condition tables. So if I scroll to the right, this second table has aged my fleet. So it's showing me that, for example, for my 2000 Chevy, I have one in my fleet currently. It was purchased in 2000, and the useful life is 15. So that means that in 2018, because all of this particular fleet type is past its useful life benchmark, I have 0 remaining for the rest of the years. Now, if I go down to the Dodge PT, this was purchased in 2010. The useful life benchmark is 10. And so in 2018, I would still have my one vehicle because it hasn't reached useful life benchmark. But starting in 2021, I would have 0 because at that point it's past my useful life benchmark. Continuing to scroll to the right, this next table, I would enter in the peak vehicles that are scheduled, that I have scheduled for use in each year, and then enter in a spare factor. I'm going to, at this point, switch to this switch to my pre-filled file here just to continue saving us some time. So this is the exact same information that we've been entering as we've been going along. But here I've already entered in my peak vehicle scheduled and my spare factors. So you'll see for the 2000 Ford, for this theoretical agency, because we also have 2007 Fords, we haven't scheduled any vehicles at all for the 2000 Ford. So I've left those blank. So that means that none of these vehicles are required in the future years. So once you enter in this information, you would click calculate, and that's what would generate the vehicles required. And then in addition to generating the vehicles required, this also calculates what the purchase amount will be if you decided to replace all the fleets that you need to replace in the year that it's recommended. So again, I have 0 for my Ford CW, my 2000 Ford CW, because I had no vehicles scheduled. But then for some of the other vehicles, so for example, for the Dodge PT, sorry, not that one. The Ford CW, I have some costs here because I would need to purchase 1 vehicle in 2018, 2 vehicles in 2019, 0 in 2020, and so on and so forth. Now, the last thing that you would do on this tab is enter in an inflation rate. This should be 2, not 20, 200. And then once you hit calculate, it calculates in the green cells here the total expenditure in the year of expenditure. So the first total at the top is just the sum of all your purchases, but the total in the year of expenditure is taken inflation into consideration. So that's how you use the fleet replacement module sheet. Once you're done with this, the idea is that you make some internal decisions using this information on which of these fleet you would like to replace. You can copy and paste, or however you would like. You would then enter in that information into your investment prioritization tab. So you'll see here I've gone ahead and entered in my project that I've selected for 2017, 18, and 19. And then you would also enter in asset category, asset class, the cost, and priority. So this is basically the end of the inputs that you would need to generate your asset management plan. I'll hit save again to make sure that my file is saved. And then when I go to click finish, what this is going to do is generate the output. Now, as I click finish, because of the size of the file and the limitations of Excel, it's doing a lot of calculations in the background, so I really have to give it a minute to be able to generate my output pages. It may look like it's going crazy, but as long as the cursor is spinning, it's generating your output. All right, so I clicked finish, and you saw that now I have what looks like an asset management plan that's been generated by Excel. So the tabs are the pages of the plan, and then you have some appendices as well. So this is really the exact information that I entered in when I started. I have my introduction here. If I go to the next page, this is my capital asset inventory, but this is just a summary table from that input tab. So the actual detailed inventory will be available in the appendices. The next page is my decision support. I'm sorry, let me go back a second. So you have the asset inventory summary at the top, and then at the bottom, the second page, you have your condition assessment as well. So this is also the condition summary table that was in the input tables that we saw, input sheets that we saw. So if I go to the next page, this is my decision support information. Again, the exact information that I typed in is what has been generated here. And then the next page lists out my appendices. So depending on which I click on, it will take me to the page that has my appendix. So I clicked on Appendix A, which is the asset register. You see that shown here. I can go back to the plan, click on B2, which is equipment condition. So it shows my table. I go back, I click on my proposed investment list. It shows the listing of the investments that I selected. So you can just click on any of these and it will take you to the appendix sheet that you need. Now, in order to print the plan, you have to be on the very first page of the plan. Here to the left, you see a Print TAM Plan tab, button. If I click Print TAM Plan, it should generate a dialog box for which printer I would like to use. So this list that you see here is the list of printers that my personal computer my work computer that I'm using is connected to. So these are all printers in different offices that I've visited. So for each computer that each person uses, you should have the list of printers that your computer is connected to shown there. We recommend that you print to PDF if you have a PDF printer, because then you get a chance to preview what your output would look like before you print out the plan if that's how you want it. So I select my PDF printer, I click OK, and then it takes me to where I save my file. And then here I have my output. I'm going to make it a two-page view so you can see. So this is exactly how it prints out: my introduction, my capital asset inventory, condition assessment, decision support, and then my appendices. Push this back. Yeah, so you have the asset register, the vehicle condition, equipment condition, facilities condition, investments, and then the fleet module output is also printed here. So that's the output. If your desire is not to use this tool in this way, you're welcome to copy and paste straight out of these Excel sheets. The output sheets are down at the bottom. And copy and paste into whatever format you have your asset management plan that you're developing in. So that's pretty much it in terms of navigating through this tool and walking through the tool. What we're going to do now is switch back to the presentation. And then continue on. So there are some things that are very important to remember as you are using this template and this tool. First is to follow instructions closely. Given some of the limitations in Excel, it's important to follow the order of the buttons in order to initiate the programming that's built into the back of the tool. So for example, I'm sorry, one second. So for example, so you can't see the slide? So sorry, let me just remind everyone that on this portion, you might want to exit out of full screen and go back to the original view that you had before we went through the walkthrough of the template. All right, so going back to this, sorry, I was talking about important things to remember as you're going through or using the template. First, you want to follow the instructions that are listed that are stated in the template closely. So for example, as we went through the inventory sheet, you saw that I had to scroll to the bottom to click finish and then scroll up to click summarize before I continue on. If I didn't click finish at the bottom, my condition sheet will not have been populated. So it's important to follow the instructions and click everything that needs to be clicked in order for the tool to work as it's supposed to. You also saw several places where there were drop-down menus. Wherever there is a drop-down menu, that likely means that the options are built into the tool and the options are going to be used in future parts of the tool. So for example, for asset category, there are only 3 options. We recommend that you don't sort of create your own option because then there wouldn't be a condition table generated for that. And then the asset classes that you have correspond to the categories, but you have the option of creating custom asset classes as well. And we saw that in the introduction sheet. So that was my next point. Creating custom asset classes is also an option. And then I walked us through the use of the fleet replacement module in detail. Again, this is an optional module. It's an optional sheet. So you do not need to use it, but it provides a great resource for helping you figure out how your fleet is going to age and some recommendations for replacing your fleet. Now, since this template has been out, the FTA has received a lot of feedback on users wanting to unlock the tool to customize it for their needs. Given that a lot of people are know how to use Excel in that way, you're very welcome to unlock the tool. There are no passwords built into it, so you can freely unlock it. But just note that it becomes difficult for us to provide support once you've unlocked the tool and played around with some of the processing that goes behind it, because then we don't know how it works anymore if too much is done in that scenario. And then on top of that, any future upgrades may or may not be compatible with the customization that you add on to the tool. And then lastly, I also went through the printing options. Again, output prints best to PDF, but you are welcome to select any other printer in the dialog box that shows up once you hit print. And then you can also print it at any point as you go through the template, just like a regular Excel file. So if you want to hit File and Print, you can print at any point. You just have to sort of be careful of what you're printing, because I think the complete tool, which includes the input pages and the output pages, prints to a lot of pages. I think it's somewhere around 20 pages. Okay, so we're near the end of my presentation here. Lastly, we wanted to just highlight these 3 questions because we found that a lot of providers and many DOTs already have pre-existing forms of collecting this asset information or this data from their subrecipients. And so one way that we recommend to use this template is as a summary sheet for all your subrecipients if you're a DOT or an MPO. But if collection forms don't currently exist, if you don't already have collection forms, you can use this tool to distribute to your subrecipients to be able to collect their information. And what that does is it standardizes the way that your data is collected and helps you to generate a simple plan in an easy way. So as we were developing the tool, we did have some input from several small providers, several industry groups, and some state DOTs. And so we're grateful for their participation and their reviews of our work. In just a minute, we will be answering some questions, but I did want to provide this additional information on how you can follow up with any additional questions you have. So if you have questions on how the tool itself works, if you have bugs in the tool, anything that's related to the technical and functional capabilities of the tool, you can contact me. My email address is on the screen. If you have questions about the FTA regulations and requirements, you can contact Ms. Shadoni Smith over at the FTA, who will be the best resource to answer those type of questions. And then finally, if you have any questions on this webinar, the recording, or any of the resources that were provided, please contact Lori Glickman, who opened us up today, and she'll be able to answer those questions. So at this time, we will open up for questions that are related to the functional capabilities of the tool and the template, and I will answer the questions as best as I can. So
and I will answer them as best I can. I will ask them as best as I can. I'm going to back up and start with the ones that came in the order they arrived, and I tried to jot down the slide approximately where the question popped up. So hopefully, if I need clarification, this person will get in the chat box. On the very first slide, LA Metro said, for a sponsor of a group plan, is the template to be done once to include all participants' data, or one template for each participant, and then all the templates, participants, workbooks compiled together for the group plan?
I think the choice is yours. You can use it to collect your participant information, and then consolidate the information after that, or you can enter it all into the template at once, and then generate the output that way. So it's really up to you how you would like to use the template. Hopefully that answers the question.
Let's hope so. It's hard having no feedback. So the next question was on slide 6. It was again from LA Metro. It says, which other Tier 1 is sponsoring a group plan? Would it help to jump back to that slide at all? Because I can do that if you want.
Sure, let's jump back to the slide.
Okay, so there, and that was 6. So, oh, well, I don't know exactly. 7. Okay, I was close. Okay, so around here, they wanted to know which other Tier 1 is sponsoring a group plan.
Okay.
Typing in the chat box.
So actually, I think this question was related to the poll that we did, because if you excuse me, if you look at the poll results, there were 2. Oh, well, now there's 1. But there were 2 large transit providers sponsoring a group plan. Unfortunately, we are not able to tell who selected that based on who's on the call. But if you contact the FTA, Ms. Shadoni might have some idea based on feedback she's received on who that is. Alternatively, if you're another Tier 1 agency that's sponsoring a group plan, please reach out to LA Metro staff, because I suppose they would like to collaborate with you or pick your brain on something.
Okay. So LA Metro also clarified rather in the chat box. They were asking like who the other one was, but I guess we can't. As you said, we don't know. Around slide 10, LA Metro also asked, for sponsors, is the introduction for the sponsor talking about the group as a whole, or do we need to do this for each participant?
Again, the answer is really it's up to you. You can craft the introduction in such a way that it talks about the group as a whole and presents a general overview of the group, or you can provide a short paragraph or a couple of sentences on each provider. It's really up to you. There's not a limit on how much information you can put into that cell.
Okay, and on slide 10, from Susan Montgomery, she said, why do you keep referring to it as, quote, practice TAM plan? Is that what is due to FTA in fall 2018, or does the tool just produce a practice document and I have to do something else to create the actual transit asset management plan?
I think if we did refer to it as a practice plan, that might have been an error. The tool, we did begin developing this guide in the tool before the regulations were finalized. And so although it does lead you to a generally compliant asset management plan, our advice is that you sort of, look through that and use it and identify where there might be gaps, and, fill the gaps as needed. But if we refer to it as a practice plan, I think that was probably an error.
You're listening very carefully. The next was from around slide
Sorry,
13.
Lori, I'm going to go back to that question for a second. I think
sorry.
Possibly what we did say was good practice TAM plan. And what we really mean is like good practice or best practice, or so a TAM plan that is that generally includes a lot of good things. That's what I meant by good practice.
Okay, clear that up. On 13, clarification was needed from LA Metro. They well, they wrote, or tier ones who pass through grants to subrecipients, and then they clarified that something on the slide, who the template is for. Sponsors are not just DOTs or MPOs. It could also be tier ones like us who process grants for participants. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's just a clarification of an oversight by us on the slide, where the second bullet where we say state DOTs or MPOs that are developing plans for subrecipients. I think they're pointing out that there are other agencies that also could sponsor a group plan. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, good. The next one is on 19. Whoops, I'm just going ahead this way because the numbers didn't show up the other way. So I apologize for the fast slides going by everybody. Are there multiple pictures on this? Okay, well, LA Metro said, do we need to include descriptions of each participant in a group plan? And then they commented that the condition assessment tab, columns J and beyond, the links are broken.
So do we need, I'll take the first question first. Do we need to include descriptions of each participant in a group plan? I think I sort of answered this question with a previous question. Ideally, you want to at a minimum list the participants in the group plan. The amount of detail you provide on the service they provide and who they are is really ultimately up to the sponsor or whoever is developing the group plan. The second question on the links being broken, I did not find that to be the case in my version of the file, so we might, let's see if we can get in touch outside of this webinar, and then I can figure out what's going on with the file that you have.
Yeah, maybe they clicked on something, or I don't know, who knows. Anything can happen. So LA Metro, get in touch with Margaret. Her contact information was on the last slide and is also in the handout on the last slide. You should be able to read that. On slide 22, Jeanette Eckert wanted to know where they can locate a copy of a completed plan, I guess to use as an example.
Okay. So we don't have an example of a plan that was completed using the template up anywhere, and I'm sure we could put that up on the FTA website somewhere after we consult with FTA. However, there are examples of other TAM plans on the FTA website that you can use. So I don't think that those were completed using this template. They might have been, but we haven't put one up using the template.
Okay. LA Metro, same slide. Should we do decision support process for the group as a whole, or what each participant does separately?
I think it's important to document all the decision support processes that go into your asset management process. And so if your participants have their own processes that maybe they use to select their recommended project, which the main recipient then whittles down that number of projects based on their own decision support processes, it's good practice to list them all in the plan so that you have a comprehensive view of everything that is used, everything that goes into how you make your decisions. So hopefully that answers the question.
They also commented, how about sharing what you just filled out in reference, that was a previous question about the completed plan. That was related, so I jumped ahead.
We can definitely share that. We can share that. We would have to figure out where, but Lori, we can talk offline and figure that out.
Okay. Yeah, we have ways to share things. There were two questions in the template, but I don't know if you want me to just continue on with the slide questions and then go to the template after, or how you want to do that.
Why don't you ask the question? I may be able to answer it without going into the template.
Okay. So there were the first one at some point, and it was hard for me to tell because I'm not as familiar where you were in the template. In the Transit Asset Management Plan type, can you add group TAM plan / RPTA sponsor? That was from Rhonda Halbert. I'm not sure how to say that.
Sure. So I believe this question is coming from the drop-down options. Let's go to my shared screen.
Okay. Yeah, you left it up, so it should be.
Okay, so I think what the question is, or the recommendation is to add in another option here for a group plan sponsor. That we will take that feedback back to the FTA, and if we're able to add that in, that will be added in a update of the tool.
Okay. And Kira Smith asked, do all of the asset inputs correlate to the transit asset management inputs required for NTD reporting?
Sorry, Lori, can you ask that question again?
Sorry. Do all of the asset inputs correlate to the TAM inputs required for NTD reporting?
So the inputs are for an asset management plan, and so the NTD, I believe, requires more information than we are collecting here. We did try to align the language with NTD language, but I do believe that NTD collects additional information beyond what we have in the template.
Okay. Those are the only two questions during the template demo. So that the next question is on slide 26. This is from Sharon, whose last name I'm not going to attempt to say because I'll probably butcher it. Can inventory information be imported from another database?
If you're talking about imported in an automatic sense, no, we don't have anything built in here where you can automatically import information into the Excel file. If whatever database you use exports into Excel, you can do that, and then we recommend copying and pasting similar to what I did during the walkthrough into those yellow cells on the inventory tab. Hopefully that answers the question.
I guess we'll hear, hopefully, from Sharon. If we
Sharon,
don't.
Sharon,
The next
Sharon
question.
I was going to say, Sharon, if that doesn't answer your question, please add in another comment in the chat box.
Yes. The next one is from Carolyn Belforti. It looks like the template has a vehicle replacement page, which would help with the prioritization. With capital projects, but how would you handle facilities in prioritization for the capital plan?
So that's a great question. Unfortunately, we did not build that into the tool. We didn't build in prioritizing facilities projects into the tool. So you would have to do that outside of the tool and then enter in the list of your facilities projects into the tool. That's also good feedback and something that we could possibly consider for an update after consulting the FTA.
Okay, good. Lauren Fiore asked, if you're collecting data from multiple agencies, can the report differentiate between them or not? For example, a group with sub-recipients. Yeah.
Okay, for this question, I'm going to go back into the tool just to point something out here. So the answer to the question is yes. First of all, in the Getting Started tool, you know, if you're creating a group plan, you would select sponsor, and then you would list your subrecipients or the participants down here. Now, one thing that you didn't see because we didn't develop a group plan is that in the output, you would get a listing of these participants also printed out as part of the plan. Now, when you enter in your asset data, your inventory information, there's a column for asset owner. This may or may not, be similar to what the question is asking, but this is ideally where you would enter in who the asset belongs to, which I would assume is where the data would be coming from if the asset belongs to them. So that was a sort of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that answers the question. But beyond that, Lauren, we haven't built in any way to differentiate between where the data is coming from.
Okay, and as far as I can tell, the last question is from Marilyn. With this tool, will importing and exporting be an option when using a different database for inventory control? Which I guess is similar to the previous question about.
Yeah. Again, it is. Yeah, it's I think the same question. Again, we would recommend copying and pasting the way that you saw me copy and paste. If you have trouble copying and pasting, it's recommended that you paste text only, and that should, put in the information the way that you need it. We don't have an automatic import and export function into this tool, but if the database that you use has an export into Excel, you can export it into Excel and then copy and paste it into the tool.
That was all of the questions. Does anybody else have any other questions you'd like to type in the chat box? Or again, if you have questions you'd rather wait and ask either of us, you can email us, certainly. Oh, people are typing. See what they say. When you do this, there's always sort of a lag. And there's dead airspace. Sit here waiting. I'm reading to you. I mean, you can. I think you can see that now, Margaret. But it says, "Can we get slides of the example filling out the template?"
Yeah, we can. Well, the slides for the presentation have already been emailed out, and you can download it to the left of your screen at the top where it says "Download Handout." If you would like some additional information, additional examples, you can certainly reach out to me. And let me go back to the screen that has contact information on it. So yeah, you can certainly reach out to me, and I will help you out as best as I can.
Looks like there's a few more people typing, so we'll just wait another minute. And we'll probably have to be wrapping it up. Jeanette Eckert, she wants to know about what the target numbers mean, 20% and 10%. Do you see that there?
Yep, I do. Going to go back to my screen.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
It is in the template. Okay, so that was here on the introduction tab, and she's asking about these numbers here. So the FTA, well, as part of the federal regulations, agencies are required to set targets for the FTA performance measures. So the performance measure for revenue vehicles is the percentage of vehicles that are at or have exceeded their useful life benchmark. And so the target here is that in 2018, this phantom agency or example agency would like to have, their target is to have only 20% of their articulated buses at or past their useful life benchmark. And then in 2019, this number goes down to 10. So they hope to have, or their target is to have only 10% of their articulated buses in 2019 at or past their useful life benchmark. So that's what these numbers here mean. And then, so it's the same for equipment. For facilities, the FTA performance measure is the percentage of facilities with a condition rating below 3 on the FTA term scale. And so here again, in 2018, the target is to have 20% or less of their facilities with a rating below 3 And then in the next year, the target is to have 10% or less of their facilities with a rating below 3. So that's what this means. And this is you can get more information on this if you look at the primer, the part 1 of the guide, which explains performance measures. It explains the FTA, the federal requirements, and it provides an example of how you can set performance targets as well.
Cool. One more question came in. It's from Juan. I don't know if you can see it there. It says, well, first he says this was a great webinar, so that we feel good about that. And he said, we understand the revenue vehicles, but can you explain about the computers?
Okay, so going back to my shared screen again. Computer equipment, I created that as a custom asset class. Some agencies have equipment that they would like to include in their asset management plan. Yeah, so for FTA requirements, there's a threshold on the value of your equipment that you have to include in your asset management plan. An agency that I'm working with has decided on a threshold that's even lower than the FTA threshold, so computer equipment falls into that threshold. So basically what I'm saying is that they have decided that they will include computer equipment in their asset management plan. So it's really, it's custom, it's not required. If you don't have computer equipment that you would like to include in your asset management inventory, or don't have to include based on the FTA regulations, you don't have to, but you can. So hopefully that answers the question. I could have put anything else here. I mean, I could have put bus fare collectors, or I could have put coin counters, or some kind of maintenance equipment in here, but it's a custom class that you can create.
Oh, Wanda, got it. Thank you. Robin Munson had a question about the percentages you were speaking about earlier. Before this last question. She wants to know if there's best practices for them. You see it there?
So in the primer, sorry, I don't think that we recommend best practice targets. Really, your target should be set based on your current asset condition and ideally what's achievable given your constraints. So for example, you would consider your financial constraints, any other types of constraints you have as an agency, and use that to inform how you set your targets. So the primer does go into detail, or it provides an example of how you can set performance targets, but I do not believe that we provide best practice percentages because it really should be based on your baseline asset condition and what's realistically achievable in your time frame that you're looking at.
Oh, she said, thank you. Very helpful. I'm assuming it's a she. It could be a he. I guess Robin. That's presumptuous of me. I guess last call for questions, everybody. Going once, going twice. I don't see anyone typing. Okay, if you have any more questions, you know how to reach us. I want to thank everyone. Oh, Margaret, do you have anything else you want to add? No?
No. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully this was helpful. And then our contact information is up there. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer your questions. And a lot of questions may be specific to particular agencies, or something might have gone wrong with the file that you have that you're using. So feel free to reach out and ask those questions if you have that. That's it for me,
Great.
Lori.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for participating. Special thank you to Margaret for her informative presentation. The feedback already seems to be very positive in the chat box alone. As a reminder, speaking of feedback, you will be receiving an invitation to fill out an evaluation survey for this event. We all greatly appreciate your feedback. If you could just take a couple minutes to complete that, we would be very grateful. And thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Margaret. Take care.